It's a big challenge ahead, Mike, in terms of decarbonisation, especially for HGVs. What's your overview of it all?
We're at the sort of the foothills when it comes to decarbonising HGVs, but we may be the foot. You're going to have to climb the mountain if you are to deliver net zero. As a society, as a country, you need to decarbonise all of road transport. And so HGVs, while the numbers of vehicles on the road aren't that great, the mileage they do is significant, and obviously the emissions. It is part of the future, that transition. We're gradually seeing more technologies being put on the road, more models. The question is, can we make them affordable for users, and also can you recharge them, refuel them, whatever the technology is, that needs infrastructural investment.
And what's your tip on those kind of horses for courses fuels that you're seeing?
I think we're going to see a multiplicity of different types of technologies, because there's often that view that electrification will solve all issues. You think about different use cases. Long haul coaches, for instance, want to get from A to B. They don't want to stop every 2 hours to charge. In terms of, again, sometimes you fear that people view HGVs as just homogenous. It's for freight. It's not. It's for cement mixes. It's for fuel transport. A whole range of different types of technologies. Different technological solutions for different uses may be part of it.
Okay, in your presentation, you put up a slide which showed what the Germans are doing, what the French are doing, what the Spanish are doing in terms of supporting that transition to net zero. British government, nothing yet. How essential is that sort of governmental support for that net zero transition?
Well, we think the government is sort of, rather than carrot and stick, it's using the stick, and that's regulation. You're seeing it on passenger cars and vans with a zero emission vehicle mandate. We know end of sale dates are coming for both of those types of vehicles, as well as HGVs, sub 26 ton, 2035, over that to 2040. Okay, that's the stick. How do you help users, fleet operators, invest in some of these things? There is some grant there in terms of plug and van grant and truck grant. It's relatively small compared to what's available in many other European countries. So the danger is that these vehicles, in small supply to start with, will go to those markets where the incentives are more generous than here. That makes it that much harder for the UK to meet its net zero challenges.
I was talking earlier to DHL, who admit this is a challenge, but they're down the road in terms of investment and all the rest of it. By contrast, yesterday I was talking to 15 SMEs who are typical small truck operators, and they're really nowhere on this path, and they're terrified about the cost, and the lack of charging infrastructure, cost of the units to buy, but also the charging infrastructure or refueling infrastructure doesn't exist. What's your advice to them?
I'm not surprised by what you describe. For the larger companies, obviously deeper pockets, and they can, their fleet renewal cycles, you can sort of factor that in. And you've seen a lot of the big companies, the supermarkets in particular, say they want to green their fleets. Great, they've got the capability and capacity to do that, and they should be doing it. They're definitely calling to be net zero in all that they do. For small operators, the challenges are much more significant. You do have to look at the total cost of ownership, and that's where manufacturers are trying to drive down cost, looking at some of the other input costs, but also looking at how you're going to use the vehicle. If you're a small operator, the cost, one of the biggest costs potentially up front will be connecting to the grid for high voltage system. Do you need to do that? If you're in a cluster of other logistics companies, collectively, that should be one of the first parts of the country that we should be electrifying publicly. It makes absolute sense to do so. But you need to say, okay, let's gather that information, get government to develop a strategy that says, here are the hotspots we go to first, as well as the strategic road network to connect everything up, and hopefully you can then help people make that transition.
We've seen that the people who make Vauxhall have got a call out today which effectively says we need to renegotiate parts of the Brexit agreement to make it possible to produce future Vauxhalls in the UK. What's your take on that?
What they're pointing to is the Brexit deal, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. Within it were provisions about trade in automotive vehicles, specifically battery electric vehicles. They get, and the rules of origin, in other words, the proportion of local content in those vehicles to qualify tariff-free. Those rules get tougher beginning of next year. What we've seen over the last 4 years, when the deal was done was pre-COVID, we're in a different world. Both demand for battery electric vehicles has gone up significantly. Levels of investment in Europe and UK in gigafactories hasn't kept pace. So the danger is that you still have to import your batteries from further afield, which means there's a real danger that the very vehicles you want to encourage, the emissions vehicles, could be more expensive through the application of tariff. What this needs is a common sense. This is not good for UK manufacturing. It's not good for European manufacturing either. Two sides say, okay, we agree, we just need to extend that period, side letter. It's not a full renegotiation of the deal.
Mike, if I had a magic wand, which I obviously don't, and gave you one wish for your industry, what would it be?
From a manufacturing perspective, it is an industrial strategy that links all these things, in terms of energy costs, in terms of labor, in terms of this transition. Something that brings it all together, make sure we've got a competitive investment environment. Because you want to make, this transition isn't just about the market, it's about manufacturing. So if I can beg two, that's the manufacturing side. On the market side, give us the infrastructure, not just for passenger cars, but for vans, for trucks, for buses, and the connections to the grid, because that is the biggest obstacle everyone is citing in this transition.
And for the heaviest HGVs, 2040, is that an achievable target in your view?
Well, if government puts into law that requirement, it has to be. But what it needs to, it's all very good just signing the legislation. You need to have the building blocks to get you there. That is about infrastructure. It's about affordability of the technology, and it's about all the packages and support that businesses need to make that transition.
We're seeing the EU climbing down from 100% to 90% by 2040. Do you think that's something that we should mirror in this country?
Europe's taken, if you like, perhaps a more flexible approach. They've said to manufacturers, right, there's your target. You figure out how you're going to get there, at what period, but that's the target and that's the deadline. Trying to dictate the market year by year, either in terms of mandate or the transition, is a high-risk strategy. It focuses the mind and might give more confidence for infrastructure investment, but we're part of a global race. You need to get the products here, and the products here also have to have similar technologies to those just over the border, whether that's in Ireland, France, Belgium, because as we know, international freight crosses borders. You can't have one technology in one market and another one, say, here.
Great. Mike, thank you very much indeed. That's brilliant.